Jesse, I know you're a huge advocate for the use of psilocybin. Can you explain why? Like in your own experiences and working with clients, what have you seen that's kind of turned you into a believer when it comes to working with these plants?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's kind of a loaded answer, I think, because it's multifaceted.
Mm.
But so first, I'll say that let's first go with the personal route because the use of psilocybin came for me personally before it ever crossed my mind to be using the medicine with clients. So
Okay.
typically, I mean, everything that every modality that I practice or that I use is something that I found benefit for myself first in some way or another.
Mm.
It was particularly when I introduced microdosing on psilocybin into my own daily routine that all this work I had been doing to raise my consciousness and to heal myself emotionally and physically, it was the addition of the microdosing of the psilocybin that really took things to the next level for me personally. And so it made sense at some point that I could introduce that with clients who were going through the same process as me. And that's because I have firsthand experience, right? So it makes it a whole lot easier to guide somebody or lead somebody or utilize a specific medicine if you have the personal experience of using it yourself. So if I were to drop down a few more categories into that question, mushrooms themselves, the psilocybin themselves, mushrooms are a network, right? And they cover our planet. They connect to each other and they connect to other organisms on this planet and they communicate and they send messages. And beyond that, they are vital for the decomposition process, breaking something down in order for something new to come into its place. So symbolically, there's something there to that, especially if we're using them for a therapeutic benefit of overcoming something that is not working in our life in order to replace it with something that is of benefit. The mushrooms themselves are non-pharmaceutical, which if you know me, like many people in the US, I grew up just deeply programmed to believe that allopathic medicine was just what you do. And as I entered adulthood, I really started to shift away from that because I was never actually getting the benefits that were supposed to come from medications, surgeries, or procedures, but specifically like the medications. So I have always struggled with two main emotional imbalances, and that is depression and anxiety. And the two played off of each other all the time. Mm-hmm. And I spent the bulk of my 20s on pharmaceutical antidepressants. If there was a benefit to it, it was more of a placebo than anything else because nothing really changed other than me telling myself, oh, I'm taking this medicine, so it must be doing something. Mm-hmm. What I realized when I went off of those medications is that, yeah, they were doing something, but I don't know that it was something that was entirely like beneficial for me because even tapering off of an antidepressant made me feel like my brain was just swirling. Like I did not feel connected to myself at all. And that lasted for, the couple of weeks that I was tapering down, plus then afterwards, it took me quite a while to feel rebalanced. Through that process, I really started to become more of an advocate for natural medicines from the earth. And I won't digress too far, but it was through herbal medicine that I was able to resolve health conditions, physical health conditions that had been with me for like 15 years that Western medicine could not figure out. They couldn't figure out the answers. And it was just this repeating cycle and loop. And when I started taking plant medicine, like herbs, right, for specific patterns of disharmony that were a part of me, that's when all of my symptoms went away. So there was an aha moment for me there, which was, oh, we can just use plants to treat internal conditions. So it makes sense that when I started exploring other options for my depression and anxiety, that I turned to plants. We typically use the phrase plant medicine, and it's generally nowadays associated with mushrooms or ayahuasca or iboga or a lot of these psychedelic plants. But plant medicine, it goes far beyond that, right? That's just, the psychedelics are just one category of it.
Yeah, like all the herbs and teas and all that.
Right. So the benefits that I experienced through both microdosing and macrodosing on psilocybin far outweighed anything that pharmaceutical medications and allopathic medicine could do for me. So the more I learn and the more I experience and the more benefits that I uncover to psilocybin in many different applications, it just solidifies the reason why I would use them for myself and for others.
Yeah,
hopefully
absolutely.
That's like, I may have kind of wandered with that, but
no, I love the tie-in, and I love the tie-in the Western medicine. We were going to get into this a little later, but can you describe just personally what the difference was for you doing a macrodose within a ceremony and then versus microdosing, which you do over a prolonged time? And is that with the microdosing, is it different for every person? Because Dan and I can only speak from experience where we've done the macro doses of psilocybin. So we've never prolonged done a microdose. We've done smaller microdoses, but just a one time. It wasn't over a lengthy period.
A period of time. I got you. Okay, so microdosing versus macrodosing. There are a few things that I'll point out with both of these. First of all, macrodosing, taking a dose that is probably, we would say, a gram or higher. There are plenty of times in my younger years when I took a macro dose of psilocybin just to party, have fun time, like see what happens. What I've realized, though, as I've matured in my own spiritual process, is that a macro dose of psilocybin, and with any psychedelic for that matter, it opens your chakras. And it opens them whether they're ready to be opened or not, or whether or not you did the work to facilitate opening them. And that can be a real shock to the system. So as I reflect back, I can't recommend that somebody starts taking macro doses of any psychedelic if they haven't done some sort of work on their own mind, body, soul connection. And without having done some sort of work to know their body's energy and how the chakras work and how to tune into that. Because it can be a really overwhelming experience when you've been closed off for your entire life, and then you take this dose of mushrooms and it's like everything opens and expands all at the same time. Microdosing, on the other hand, is this subtle little addition of the psychedelic frequency into your system. It's much gentler. If we're talking about, anything below probably 0.3 grams, and even lower, maybe even below 0.1 gram, that would be considered a microdose. And you're not really going to get a full psychedelic effect from that. It's something that is just, like I mentioned, introducing this gentle frequency of the mushrooms into you, into your mind, into your consciousness, into your physical body. The benefits of that would be that you're getting a controlled reaction, essentially.
Mm.
When you take a microdose of psilocybin, there's enough science now so that people who like data and scientific studies, there's enough evidence now from very reputable sources that indicate a few things happen even when you're taking a microdose of mushrooms. Number one, it increases blood flow to your brain, so blood perfusion. Number two, it activates new neural pathways in your brain. And once a new neural pathway is activated, it's there forever. So it's kind of like once you learn the new thing and the new activation takes place, it's now integrated into who you are. Mm-hmm. If you're taking small microdoses on a regular basis, there's the potential then for repeated neural pathway development, which then slowly, gradually raises your consciousness. And then you look back on a period of time that's gone by and you think of how you used to be. And it's like, oh, wow, I'm a totally different person. I think totally differently than how I used to, but it's not all at once. Mm-hmm. A macrodose, if you're prepared for that experience, a few things I think happen. Number one, like I said, it opens your chakras. And when that happens, you become a more clear channel for the flow of the divine into you, which means you can feel very connected to bigger concepts other than just being this third dimensional human existing in this day-to-day reality. And you can have the most profound epiphanies and moments on a macrodose, though it tends to be something that is far more powerful all at once, mm-hmm. which you have to be prepared for. You have to be ready for that to happen. So there's big differences between the two. Now, I started using microdosing on psilocybin mainly for those two chronic things that I dealt with, which were my day-to-day anxiety and my frequent depression. Psilocybin does activate the same receptors that serotonin does in your brain and releases other feel-good hormones into your body chemistry. If you are on a regular basis taking just a small, little subtle amount that is just giving you that little boost on a regular basis, the effects of that can be really substantial. And in fact, I found them to be more effective than any pharmaceutical medication that I had ever been prescribed. Microdosing is something where you could hear 100 different recommendations on what dose to take and how to take it. And I don't know that there's any right or wrong, but what we do know is that if you're taking a microdose on a daily basis and you never stop, the effectiveness and the potency of what you're getting decreases. So your brain doesn't produce the same amount of hormones, and those new neural firings seem to just not happen as frequently, if they happen at all. So there's this idea of taking a tolerance break, right? As you build a tolerance to something, you need to pause for maybe a couple of days or maybe a week, and allow everything to kind of level out and become the new homeostasis. And then you can reintroduce the chemical that is going to start taking it up to the next level. So there is a plateauing effect, I guess we could say, if we're consistently taking psilocybin. And that's also valid for macro doses, for large doses. If you were to take several grams of mushrooms every single day for a week, let's say, by the end of that week, they're not really going to be doing a whole lot of anything. I think the benefits of the microdose on the brain chemistry and in regulating our mood and just the way that we feel on a daily basis is for me one of the biggest benefits that we can get. And then the moments of clarity or new understanding that come from the activation of those new neural pathways.
For sure. That's why they say it's medicine, right? And not drugs.
Right.
I mean, I feel like you broke that down really beautifully in that sense. And it's almost like, I've never, and I know you know me, Jesse, that I have also struggled with anxiety. So I hear that, and I would agree wholeheartedly that you really do have to fear and let go of some of that before taking a hefty dose of psilocybin, because it could put you back into a panic state really quickly and be more harmful than doing good. But someone when I was in college and I was going through like the height of my eating disorder, the guidance counselors at my school wanted to put me on antidepressants. And my mother, bless her heart, was like, no, absolutely not, because I wasn't 18 yet, so I wasn't able to make the decision on my own. I wasn't an adult. And I swear to God, that's the best thing that one of the best things that she's, done for me, because you explained, and I've heard from so many other people, how difficult it is to get off of these prescription antidepressants that is supposed to be a helpful medication. But if it is so helpful, why is it so dependent on, and how difficult it is to get off of that?
Definitely.
It's interesting.
It really is. And that's another one of the main benefits that I see from psilocybin in a therapeutic setting, which is it's non-addictive.
Of course.
So you can take mushrooms, a microdose 3 days in a row, and you can choose on the fourth day to not take anything, and you're not going to feel physical withdrawal. You're not going to feel like you can't function the way that you want to because you don't have it. You don't have the emotional or physical distress that you would have from stopping many pharmaceutical antidepressants. You don't have to taper down off of your microdosing in order to not have the potential for very serious side effects. If you were to stop a pharmaceutical antidepressant, let's say you were on it for a year and you're like, I'm just not going to take this anymore. That's actually a really dangerous situation that you're putting yourself in. It is not recommended. And if anybody out there is listening and they're like, ooh, maybe psilocybin can replace my antidepressant. If a client came to me and said that, I would say, great, I'm all for supporting you in that. However, the first thing you have to do is go talk to the physician who prescribed you that antidepressant, and you need to tell them what your intentions are. And then they need to give you the guidelines for taking yourself off of that medication. Because my personal experience of how I felt and how just like disoriented and out of my body I felt, and I did taper down in the correct manner, right? But I still had these physical symptoms. It just tells you how powerful those pharmaceuticals are, and that there are inherent risks to taking them. With a microdose of psilocybin, I legitimately have not come across a situation where there is a risk associated unless somebody is on a bunch of pharmaceutical medications.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Particularly antidepressants or anything that is altering the serotonin levels in the brain and working on the serotonin receptors. Because serotonin syndrome is something that's really serious, and it's when you have too much serotonin in your body, and it can actually be like life-threatening. So that's another word of caution, I suppose, to anybody who's listening and anybody who were to come to work with me is, number one, we're definitely not going to be taking a macro dose of psilocybin when you're on a number of different antidepressants or antipsychotic medications. Number two, I don't even recommend microdosing when you are on certain antidepressants, just because of the effects on the serotonin in the brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as you said, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's really, really helpful advice. I also wanted to kind of like speak to, like, from experience, you're talking a little while ago about kind of going into a mushroom psilocybin experience without doing the work behind it. And I've like very spread out over a long time. I have had the privilege of doing mushrooms like to kind of to party and have fun.
Yeah.
Then in like a very intentional manner, with just Elise, where we were like, I was in a much better place mentally and, you know, their intentions and focus. And then doing it in like a ceremony setting where you were there, you know about this one. But the first time I had done it, like, luckily, I had a great experience. I have no idea how much, but like a good amount of mushrooms. I was also drinking beers at the same time, and I ended up found myself luckily just kind of sitting and looking out the window for hours. But I had no way of like explaining or understanding what the process I was going through was. So as I started to come down off of the mushrooms, it was tough. And for the next few days, I was really, really depressed and just like really like kind of somewhat lost. And then comparing that to years later when I had actually like put in a lot of work to figure out, you know, who and what I am and what I was going through and heal a lot of trauma and issues, it was so much easier to kind of just recognize what was going on in the process and feel it. Like you had mentioned, like your chakras open, and I really felt like as I was first starting to feel the medicine kind of take hold, it was like my heart just like blowing open, which I think would have been really, really scary, you know, 10 years ago when I didn't know about chakras and energy and that. But it's like to be able to actually like sit in it with like a comfort of like knowing what's going on was put me in such a different place. So I just kind of wanted to share that for people who are listening. And like, luckily I didn't have what you call like a bad trip at all, but it was still really challenging just because I hadn't put in that kind of work and effort.
Yeah. Certainly, you know, I've talked to people who have great experiences from like going to a concert and taking some mushrooms and dancing and, you know, and for sure that's possible. I think I've also heard a lot of just kind of like horror stories about spending several hours in a really bad headspace.
Yes.
You know, because the intention was not there.
Yes.
You know, if you go, let's take the example of the concert, right? You're at a concert, you're around all these people. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of stimuli. There's a lot of things taking you away from your own thoughts and your own body. And so I think that there's an opportunity there to kind of just flow freely with the medicine and with your surroundings, because you have this intention of I'm going to have a good time. I'm having a good time. I'm out to have a good time. And so, yeah, you're probably going to have a good time while you are intending to have a good time. Now, the flip side of that, let's say you're in a closed in space in your friend's house or something, and there's really not a lot of intention other than just taking some mushrooms. I could see that being a recipe for disaster, because you're in your mind, you're in your head, you're very aware of your body, you're very aware of your surroundings, you feel kind of trapped, and the mind can definitely, okay, well, this is the point that I was thinking of when I was kind of like thinking of how we were going to talk today. Mushrooms seem to help a separation of like our consciousness from our ego, or our ego from our consciousness.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, in certain settings, the ego doesn't like that. And the ego will try to control things, and the ego will want to override and what's happening. And the ego will also tell you that you have something to be afraid of, because the ego is always like trying to keep us safe, so they say.
Yes.
And the ego tends to keep us in a state of fear. So if you're not prepared, if you don't have the right intentions, and you go and take a macro dose of mushrooms, and your consciousness starts to shift and your ego gets scared, it's very likely that you're going to feel a lot of resistance during that experience. And then afterwards, you're going to be like, what was that? Like, that was terrible. I don't like that.
For sure. I love that we keep using and bringing up the word intention, because it makes such a difference having that intention, setting the space, setting the setting of where, how, when you're going to sit with this medicine.
Parenting can be stressful and even overwhelming, especially if you have an overly sensitive child. What if there was a way to better understand, guide, and nurture your child's unique sensitivity and emotional intelligence to set them up for success on their developmental journey? Rooted Rhythm's signature course, Tuned In, offers a transformational process for parents of highly sensitive, super feeling, wise, and empathetic children. Dan and I don't have children of our own, but we were both highly sensitive children growing up. And we know firsthand how difficult it can be to feel and process emotions in a productive and constructive way at such a young age. Recently, having gone through the Tuned In course, we both took away so much valuable information and practical tools we could utilize to reparent ourselves and to understand how to better use our sensitive nature to deepen our connection to ourselves as well as the world around us. The Tuned In course teaches parents concrete skills to meet their sensitive kids' needs in moments of intensity, increases their ability to connect deeply with their children, and supports a process of inner healing to shift how they relate to parenting. Each module offers unique grounding and embodiment meditations, lectures full of both evidence-based and practical content, and supplementary exercises to support in the implementation of new skills. Parents who have taken this course report walking away from the experience feeling relaxed in their being and confident to parent their children in a way that both feels most true to them as a parent, as well as most supportive for their children. If this resonates with you as a parent or simply for yourself, we're excited to offer our listeners $100 off of this transformational course. Click the link in our show notes, which goes directly to the Rooted Rhythm Tuned In course website, and enter the discount code DEEP Life, all one word, to receive $100 off of the Tuned In course.
And we know so many people, like you're saying, that honestly have done mushrooms and take psilocybin. I don't want to say like on the regular, but enough times where they're not necessarily having bad trips or bad experiences, but they're also not, from what I've heard, not gaining a lot of like the profound insights and wisdom that is coming from this intelligent, network of, fungi. Why is that? Is it simply because of the intention? Like, do you think the ego is blocking it? I'm sure every person is different, but I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are. Like, I know someone who's taken, psilocybin probably like 3 times in the past 3 or 4 months, but just all they say is like it was a fine time. And it's like, okay, that's great. But like, have you done an epic dose where like your life has changed?
Yeah, I wonder though, what I wonder is that what's supposed to happen?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, I think intention is the foundation of the experience that you are going to have.
Yeah.
And if you go into a psychedelic experience without really any clear intentions, then it's just kind of like, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And I'm just going to kind of see, and yeah, maybe I'll have a good experience. Maybe I'll not. Maybe I'll have some profound connections and realizations. Maybe not. So it's kind of like, well, who knows what you're going to get. Yeah, the intention is definitely something I think that, and even with microdosing, when I take my microdose in the morning, I say a little prayer and I have a little moment of setting the intention for the medicine to provide me with what I need and what I desire in order to feel as though I'm gaining the most benefits from the medicine.
Absolutely. And I remember from the beautiful journey and ceremony that we had in Costa Rica, and we can touch on that really quickly. I remember our medicine woman saying, like, these plant medicines are so intelligent and wise. They're going to give you what you need, not necessarily what you want. Not to scare anybody away, because I think that they are going to, like you said, open up your chakras to give you exactly what you need to see, need to experience, need to feel in that moment, to help you grow and evolve and raise that level of consciousness if you're prepared to do that.
Definitely.
Go
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You want me to go? Well, I think it's so interesting about the decomposition. We didn't kind of like touch upon that, but I kind of want to touch upon that just from my experience with the ceremony. But were you going to say something different before that? Obviously different, but
yeah, but go ahead, because I'll swing back around to it.
Okay, the decomposition, it just hit me now, and I feel like this is the profound nature of doing a macrodose, which our listeners will know that we did one in Costa Rica, and Jesse was our beautiful facilitator during this. So he witnessed us and witnessed Dan and held a beautiful space and ceremony with the medicine woman who was there with us. But the decomposition, that was actually one of my intentions going into the ceremony. And I didn't use the word decomposition. I just used let go of. I needed to and wanted to let go of these parts within myself that I had created to survive that were no longer suiting me. And I intentionally was letting go of, a lot of grief and sadness from my cousin's passing that had just, happened about 6 months ago. And man, oh man, I am still kind of shedding and decomposing these aspects of me, because I am a different person after that ceremony. And Jesse, I didn't tell you this, but I was journaling about and reflecting on the ceremony, because the integration part that happens after, which I know that we'll touch upon it a little bit, it's not just that you go through a ceremony and you're immediately changed. You are, but there is a lot of things that ensue and that kind of open your eyes in the coming weeks and months as you can further benefit and grow through the journey and path that you're on. I was journaling about it because with the macro doses, it can be very introspective when you have your eyes closed and you're seeing a lot, but then it can, when you open your eyes, you're in nature. We were outside at a beautiful setting and there was a fire there. And when you had described that there was going to be a fire during the ceremony, I was like, that's interesting. I'm not typically someone who's like big into fires, but I found myself having a very quick, introspective, like eyes closed, and then all I kept hearing was like, go be in nature, like let the medicine do what it needs, go sit by the fire. At this point, like I knew Dan was outside, and I'm thinking to myself, I spent the majority of the day by the fire. Like it was strange for me. I know I wanted to be in nature, and all I kept doing was putting my hands on Mother Earth. I felt so grounded, like, and she was just speaking to me in that way. But fire, I realized it was transmuting. Fire transmutes. It was transmuting the older versions of me that just needed to kind of be burned sitting next to that fire. I'm also a fire sign. I'm an Aries. So
Go figure.
Like, yeah, I didn't like it. This literally took me a month after the ceremony to realize, but it was like, oh, download after a light bulb moment is like, okay, this makes so much sense. And it keeps getting more and more beautiful. I feel the more I open and expand my consciousness, it's like more information is coming to me that makes sense. And I can almost put the pieces together on how I can now move forward with all of this information that has helped me tremendously.
Totally. I'm gonna throw in a few things that are piggybacking off of what you just said. Number one, I do believe that psilocybin it's a divine connection. It's a piece of nature that has been created by the divine, right? So in taking it, you are connecting yourself to the divine consciousness and flow, which will facilitate not only like these moments of awareness and shifts in consciousness, but it's also bringing a healing energy from the divine that will transmute or transform something that's within you. Secondly, the intention piece. It's so interesting how we can set our intentions before a ceremony, right? And you're thinking that means it's going to be this way. Like you have this preconceived thought of like, oh, well, here I'm gonna let go of this sadness, and I'm gonna refer directly to you and about you and your experience. And you think that you're gonna end up crying for hours, right? Because that's how we transmute fear. That's how we transform it. That's how we let go of it. Well, and then like, I don't know, a half hour after crying, it's like, oh wait, I don't know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. But that doesn't mean that your intention isn't valid.
Absolutely.
And so when you mentioned about like, the medicine is going to give you what you need, 100%. That may mean that the medicine, the divine nature of that medicine wants you to go sit by a fire and laugh for hours so that you can feel something other than the sadness. So it will always happen the way that it's supposed to. Now, I've witnessed other people who feel as though they are generally very positive people and very consciously awakened, and they go into a ceremony thinking that it's going to be very a beautiful eye-opening experience full of epiphanies, and they end up crying for 5 hours because the way that the medicine worked for them was different from how they initially thought it was going to be. And it turns out that there were elements within them that needed a different kind of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And both beautiful. There is no experience that's the same. And you're exactly right. It's almost like drop the expectations for sure. That would be like one of my biggest pieces of advice, obviously setting an intention, but drop, because you're right. I fully thought I was going to cry for this 8-hour ceremony. And the medicine was like, you've cried for 6 months. You're good. Go nature,
right?
Sit by the fire, laugh a little bit. And a lot of other wisdom was coming through from that fire and just.
Yeah.
it's almost like one-liners that you get from people just anywhere. It's like, oh my God, you're literally, you're also, your heart's blown open, but your mind's blown open too.
Mhm.
Yeah. There is also a real power in the fire. And so for being here in Central America, I know this is also valid in many indigenous cultures. During these ceremonies, there's always a fire, always a fire. And one of the main reasons for that is that the fire is source. It is source in a form right in front of us. And to gather around the fire and to be deeply connected with source in that way facilitates that transmutation and that transformation. And I'll add to that one of the reasons why I really prefer psilocybin and why I'm actually not necessarily drawn to using other forms of plant medicine is that mushrooms are not, they're just grown. That's it. They just grow. You pick them and you dry them and then you eat them. There's no processing to it. There's no adulteration. There's no changing it. There's no needing to add something to it in order to activate different, chemical compounds. There's none of that. And there are other plant medicines that are processed, so to speak. They are pulled together, and there's a certain process in getting them to have the power that they have. Mushrooms just have the power. You don't have to do anything to them.
Yeah, that also makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Which then that further reinforces my thought, which is they're just this magical medicine of the divine that has been granted to us.
Yeah, and you'd imagine it's been something we've done for a very long time because they're right there. You don't even need to learn how to do it. It's just like they just dry up. Once they're picked, they dry up and they're ready to go.
I don't know if we ever talked about this. It may have come up during that retreat, but there is a theory that human consciousness evolved from primates who were eating psychedelic mushrooms in the forest. And because of the power that they have in activating different parts of our brain, that was how our human consciousness evolved on this planet, which I think is pretty, I really like that theory. I really like that idea.
Holds a lot of water.
Yeah, for sure. And having experienced them firsthand, I think we all know that there are those moments. It's like, whoa.
Yep.
That's big. That's huge.
Yeah. You do. And I love that actually, I'm sorry, I meant to bring this up before when you were kind of just briefly spoke about the ego kind of coming in and trying to either resist the medicine. It's trying to, protect us. But obviously the mushrooms are trying to give you what you need in that aspect. And I think that is, I think it's really interesting because the first time I took a macro dose with Dan, I've never felt more one, like that oneness, the connection with everything. When I was laying on the grass, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not separate. Like that's kind of what you were getting to. Like the ego wants to keep you safe, and in fear, it's putting that fear within you to make you believe that you're separate, but we're not all separate. We just kind of look differently, but we're all manifesting from, like you said, that one divine source. I'm in human form, and then I'm laying on the beautiful ground in the grass, and you just kind of, it's like, if you've done the work, like you said, it's dropping that ego so that you can feel that connection in the oneness, which I believe is medicine in and of itself, because that just blew me open as well. And I felt very much like, okay, I can go deeper the next time. I want messages. I want more information on how I can better myself and have a more deep connection with the divine, which I am part of. I want her to kind of and I say her meaning, obviously there is no gender, but her meaning like mine, as
Yeah.
I'm speaking it right now in this life as a woman, like her
Your divine
guidance
consciousness.
into
Yes.
yeah, in me.
That's literally like the antithesis of the ego. Like the ego is the opposite of
Right. Right.
So it makes sense that it would be threatened in that moment when it's like all of a sudden you're starting to realize that the ego is just an illusion. You might want to claw back a little bit.
Which is,
Definitely.
I think, why, which is why you were saying, and such a good point. Anybody who's going or has, severe anxiety, it can be a challenge. Like I would not have been able, I don't believe, to take psilocybin 5 years ago. I think it would have thrown me into a panic. I've heard people talk about this with cannabis as well. I was like, if you are very anxious person, cannabis is not going to help you in that sense. I have not had that experience. I think I tried to heal myself before experimenting with cannabis, and I've only had wonderful experiences on it. But I know people who have that altered state where it puts them into a panic as opposed to a therapeutic environment.
Yeah. Any, cannabis is a psychoactive as well. So I think any psychoactive substance has the potential to activate the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're already activated, it may not always be the most beneficial experience to activate your mind even more. But that also then ties into the benefit of intention and setting. Because I do think that there is the potential for somebody to have a really intense experience on psilocybin, on whatever dose they choose, whatever they end up doing. But let's say there's those moments of like the anxiety kicks in and you're starting to realize the separation from the ego and there's this battle happening. If you have the right environment and you have the right support, you can actually work through that experience in the moment. And you can go from, point A, you can go up into this peak of chaos. And if you have the right energies around you, you can actually come through to the other side and be able to say like, oh, okay, I did that. I was able to get through that. Being alone, or let's say you're just with like a buddy who is also equally out of their mind. I mean, that could be a recipe for disaster where you literally just feel like you can't control anything, and that would be terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't touch upon that we've touched upon it in other episodes, but when we had the ceremony in Costa Rica, you, as well as our medicine woman, had a team of people there for space holders for those instances. I luckily, and I think Dan, luckily, we didn't need that in that sense, but they were there. They're oh gosh, professionals isn't the right word because that doesn't do it justice, but they're magical beings that are just there to walk you through, to help you almost navigate those egoic thoughts that can get you to spiral, as opposed to you're safe, you're here, like this is going to be helpful and beneficial, just talking their way through it with the people who need it.
Yeah. When your chakras are open, you are feeling energy differently, and you're feeling the energy of a collective experience differently. And so when, particularly for these ceremonies, the people who are there to facilitate and to hold space are there because of the frequency that they embody. And their ability to project that frequency and to know and to be able to read when somebody's energy is shifting just through a look in their eyes, or the way that they're carrying themselves, or something that they say can clue a facilitator in very quickly. And I distinctly remember, I can't remember exactly what our firekeeper had said to you, Elise, but she said something when you were out there that shifted the way that you were processing in that moment, right? And she brought you
100%.
from being at one level to another level in a one sentence phrase.
I just got chills as you said that, because I know it was like, it was equally the sentence that she said, but pulled me into a different feeling, like a different frequency that helped me. And I still embody it today. Yeah, absolutely. It was, because I was looking out at the field, and like I said, I thought I was going to cry for 8 hours, and I was staring for, time's an illusion at that point. And I said, I feel really guilty for having fun right now, and I don't know why. And she instinctively was like, look into that, get deep. That's conditioning. Go there.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit. I'm still going there.
And you
yeah.
could go there. You could go there because you felt safe enough, because you had the right environment and the
Yes.
right support.
Yes.
That's key.
Absolutely. Yes, I could not agree more. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm still integrating that for beautiful reasons. Let's get into kind of that integration quickly. Say you have a big, profound experience.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next? Like, how do you go back to, I'm going to use quotes here, quote unquote, normal life? Like, you've had your chakras opened, you're seeing things, you're understanding at a level that is much different than our third dimensional reality likes to keep us small in a box. How do you go about life after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The phrase that I use so often after a ceremony with people is being gentle with yourself. Just being gentle. Not making any judgments, not feeling like you're doing something right or wrong, not expecting anything of yourself, but just to be gentle and just be, just be, right? Going back to life can be very challenging when you've had these very profound moments. What I think is also necessary is that you go into life with an openness to maybe if something doesn't feel right about your life or doesn't feel in alignment with your life, then maybe that's telling you something. So you have to have a gentle openness with yourself that, okay, maybe what I'm now coming to understand is that these aspects of my life that I've had before the journey don't actually suit me. And maybe that means I need to make some choices and changes in order to be more in alignment with my newer, more authentic self. There's also big benefit and power in having an integration coach or an integration person, especially if for example, you come to a retreat that I'm hosting and we do a ceremony and you have these very profound moments and epiphanies and realizations. After you go back to home, I think it's really beneficial to have a person who you're checking in with. So in my example, that can be me. It can be one of the other facilitators of the ceremony. It should be somebody who understands the importance and the gentleness that is required in the integrative process. And you're talking, Elise, about how how many months are we out from the last, it's been 2 or 3 months, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're still in the integration process.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Which means that you've allowed yourself some sort of gentleness because
Yeah.
you're not resisting it and you're not finding yourself frustrated by it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from just personal experience, we're talking about the ego a lot, and we're going to continue talking about it because I feel after that experience, I can feel the resistance of my ego popping up a little bit more, but I'm able to recognize it so much more because I feel different. And I know that I can approach my thoughts and feelings in a much different way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it is a process though. Like
Mm.
I'm okay with it because I don't want to rush anything, because where I'm going is somewhere really exciting and profound and nowhere I've ever been. And I'm becoming someone I've never been. So I have to be gentle and patient with myself. And I used to get really annoyed when I fell back into old patterns and habits, but I'm doing it much less and less, and just honoring also those parts of me that I still am letting go of.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's very common that we have a realization, or we have this moment of clarity, and then all of a sudden the years of patterned behavior are just suddenly gone.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
that doesn't typically happen, right?
Right.
But it's the moment of awareness and the shift in consciousness that has to happen in order for you to make the changes in the first place. Without that, then you're still just going through the same cycles, kind of unaware or oblivious
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, it's not very likely that that's where you're going to have like that snap, like instant change. But I think also a lot of people kind of do go in with the expectation that they will. And especially like
Sure.
kind of right after the ceremony or the experience, you kind of feel like, okay, I'm different. Everything's going to be different from now on. And it's really easy to get down on yourself and beat yourself up. But
Mm-hmm.
just like Elise was just saying, like 3 months later, and there's like constantly like new realizations coming and new things, which means you're different because your
Yeah.
perception is different. You're seeing the world different, or you wouldn't be having these moments of clarity. So I think it's just like helpful to keep in mind that everything isn't like rainbows and butterflies, but I'm a completely different person because I'm clearly seeing the world differently.
Yeah. And you know what? It could be all rainbows and butterflies for somebody.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, I don't want to take that away.
You,
Sure.
yeah, we could. You could leave a psychedelic ceremony, and you could go back to your life and be like, "This is beautiful. My life is beautiful. I have nothing to worry about. Like I realized the things that were holding me back, and I loved my life already. And now I can love my life even more. It is entirely possible, right? I think we get hung up on this idea that these big, profound experiences are going to always come with some sort of heaviness, but they don't have to come with heaviness.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to always be something super challenging or super hard. In fact, it can be a lot easier than I think we make it very often.
Yeah.
And that's just through just be gentle with yourself. That's my
that's
word
probably
of the
true
day,
for
I
everything.
guess. Yeah, for real.
I almost like sort of tie this up a little bit with something that we've touched on throughout the entire conversation is raising frequency and raising consciousness. And
Yes.
in the last 2 episodes that you were on, we talked a lot about frequency. I think it would be, I would definitely, anyone who hasn't listened, I would recommend going and checking out. I think it's episodes 79 and 89. But maybe real quickly talking about just like what it means to raise your frequency or raise your consciousness, if you use frequency and consciousness interchangeably or if those are different things, and then what the role is of the psilocybin in that experience. I know we've touched on a lot, but maybe in a tight little bow.
Yeah. Well, to keep it as simple as possible, we all emanate a frequency. We are all broadcasting an energetic signature out to other humans, out to the earth, out to the universe, out to source. And that frequency is the culmination and the combined frequencies of our physical structure as well as our emotional body, and is greatly influenced by our thoughts, our words, our actions. And the frequency that we broadcast out is essentially it is the thing that is influencing our reality the most. And I think I mentioned this probably in one of those previous episodes, is that in a quantum kind of way, the universe is sending us more of whatever frequency we are sending it. So it's amplified by the universe. Our frequency is amplified, which means our reality starts to match whatever our internal frequency is, or our broadcast frequency. So when you're carrying around a lot of guilt, shame, fear, anger, anxiety, depression, all of those things, your frequency is broadcasting more of that energy than of something that is filled with love, joy, compassion, excitement, trust. And one of the bigger benefits of either microdosing or macrodosing is that you can have very profound shifts in the way that you are processing in your mind and consciousness. You can detach from your ego a little bit that's trying to control everything, and you can actually start to understand your own frequency better. An example is, like, I remember distinctly, I was out on a hike, and I had been microdosing for a couple of months, and I stopped at this one place, and it just clicked in my head. I was like, oh, the words that I'm using in my own mind, the way that I'm talking to myself is exemplifying victim mode. Like, it just clicked in my head. I'm like, like all these words that I'm using, I'm making myself seem like a victim when I'm not. It was a very profound moment of a new neural pathway being generated that made me completely see things, understand things differently about myself. And in that very moment, I'm sure my frequency shifted just from the understanding of, but then that also gave me the opportunity to, now the new neural pathway is built. And so every time I start doing or saying something that is victim mode, I catch myself almost immediately. And by doing so, I am voluntarily choosing to think something different. I'm consciously choosing to change my frequency instead of letting my frequency be governed by the fear or the anger or the sadness or blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
So frequency, everything is frequency. So frequency is kind of a big deal. And we know from an energetic perspective, if a psychedelic is opening your chakras, that means that it's enhancing the frequency, it's enhancing your frequency, it's amplifying your frequency and opening you to receiving higher levels of frequency.
Yeah.
And dimensionally, as we go up in the dimensions, the frequencies get higher, right? So source would be the highest frequency of it all. And if you are taking a substance that in this three-dimensional world connects you with source, that means you're getting a stream of real high frequency energy coming into you. And if you choose to use that in a way that benefits you, then like, that's smart. Like that's what you should be using it for.
Yeah, it also, like you said, it creates this new neural pathway and almost teaches your body, oh, this is what it feels like to experience, joy, happiness. And I thought that I knew what that meant. And it's like, it takes it to another level. And then you kind of want to experience it more. Not that you're going to take a macro dose every single day. No, but it's like your consciousness expands so that it's going to give you opportunities in your everyday life to get there through different means, family, work, job, whatever it may be, just a different hobby that's ensued or whatever it may be. It's like your life is transformed. It really, in my experience, it is.
yeah, absolutely. If you think of, if we're taking psilocybin and it has an effect on serotonin and other feel-good hormones, then when you do build that new neural pathway and you realize something about yourself, being able to accept that and actually just be like, oh, and have the light bulb moment versus, oh, well, that means that there's something else wrong with me.
Oh, yeah.
You see the difference?
Yeah.
It is. Yes. I'm really glad that you brought that up, actually.
There's a biochemical benefit to the psilocybin in being able to accept what frequency you've been in and then say, oh, I don't want to be there, so I think I'm going to change it. It facilitates much easier
that?
change.
Powerful reframe, yeah.
Such a powerful reframe. Ugh. I feel like we could spend an entire episode on frequency, so we'll maybe save that for another one. But you beautifully sum that up, and the wisdom and innate intelligence of psilocybin and everything you've been through. I want to also just thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences with anxiety and depression and pharmaceuticals and comparing. I mean, it's wonderful to hear that you've bettered your life and you've come out and are just a higher, more beautiful version of you and your truest essence. And I love that, because I know that the listeners aren't with you, but I've spent enough time in your presence. Like, you have a divine frequency, Jesse, and people aren't, in person with you, but hearing this, the words that you speak, what you put out is from the depths of your heart. And that is just truly amazing. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Elise. That was very kind.
Before we wrap up, anything that we missed that you think is important to be said about, plant medicines, whether it be psilocybin or something else, or, frequency, integration, all of this that we've touched upon today?
I think we've covered a lot of really valuable information and the key highlights. I think that if somebody is wanting to work with psilocybin, either on a micro or a macro level, I think that it's incredibly beneficial and more potent to do so with somebody assisting you, having a point person, having somebody that you're checking in with, right? So in clinical practice or in my in the work that I do in coaching programs and such, if a client is going to be adding a microdosing option, then there is no exception. Like, we will be checking in on a regular basis. We will be having these discussions. I will be available to you for whatever you need in pretty much any moment, right? If we're doing a macro dose, I will be there with you. We will do this together. You will receive the support that you need. It's really, I just don't think that there's a lot of good that comes from us trying to do things all on our own. I think there's a lot of importance to having the right support system in place. So I think that's one thing that we didn't mention, but I think it's really valuable and important.
Absolutely, you're right. And I think we were going to say this, leading up to the ceremony in Costa Rica, we prepared for it all week. Not even all week,
and even like
months
before. In advance.
We did. And that was with you. And then even before, our lovely medicine woman, like, we all individually sat down with her so that she could better understand our intentions and our needs, what was going on. So I'm so glad that you brought that up as kind of a reminder for everybody.
Yeah, you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, for sure. Well, since we last had the episode, I mean, you've had serious life changes. You live now in Costa Rica. And I want to make sure that we put in the show notes all of your updated information. So where, new website, I know your Instagram. Did you change your Instagram handle?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Give us all the good.
Instagram handle. So now that I'm living in Costa Rica, I've settled in an area called Nosara. And so I've decided to embrace that. And The new website is nosaraenergyhealing.com. And my Instagram handle has now changed a little bit, and it's jwarner.nosaraenergyhealing. So you can Google search Nosara Energy Healing, and it will pop up, and you can see a list of just all of the different services and support that I provide, and that includes some plant medicine options and ceremony options and coaching opportunities. So there's a lot there.
Perfect.
Costa Rica is beautiful. Come visit me.
It
We have a retreat coming up in April that still has openings. So that's definitely worth mentioning, is that there is a retreat April 24th through May 1st here in the Nosara area at a very beautiful retreat center. Dan and Elise can speak for it and the experience there. There will be a psilocybin ceremony, a full day ceremony that we will be facilitating, plus other plant and animal medicines in private ceremonies.
Perfect. Thank you so much for giving all that information. Yes, we cannot recommend the retreat more. I mean, it just really, other than life-changing in the most beneficial way. We will link all of this into the show notes. And again, Jesse, just thank you for your time, your wisdom, your love, all of the essence.
Thanks, you guys.
That you give us.
Thank you, Jesse.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Definitely. All right.